with that in mind, I'm referring back to a very famous story about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's known sometimes by the acronym Rashbi. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hid from Roman oppression in a cave near Tiberia, supposedly for 10 years. And I think it was 20 years in the end. And he came out with the Zohar, supposedly. That's what the Zohar claims, although historically speaking, we think the Zohar dates from about 1,000 years later. But that's what the Zohar claims, that his seclusion in that cave led to this great Torah. So perhaps our seclusion will lead us to great Torah as well. And so what I thought is we would, let's take a look at the Mishnah, which I'll share right now on the screen. And then we can kind of go through it with one glance, and then I'll kind of mention how I think his biography might be. Okay, there we go. How his biography might. I had that. That's strange. Sorry. I thought I had the plug-in to share my screen, but apparently it has been rewritten. So, just a second. Try this again.
What device are you using?
I was going from an iPad. Yeah, screen sharing is failing to start. Please start again later. Error code 0.
Yeah, it might be Zoom is overloaded.
Okay. Well, here's what we'll do. We'll go
you
from.
Send me a document and I can post it.
Oh, I can do that. Yeah. Thanks, Corey.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Okay, and now.
We're not on video yet.
This is weird. No, it's not.
Stop video.
It always,
Yeah.
challenges. It's, I don't know why it's giving me this one. Updating. Sorry, I'm going to send the document. I converted the document and everything, but now it's giving me a hard time. I had to open up. Here we go. Okay, everyone, the document will soon be available in our chat. Well, why can't I do that?
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay. I gotta figure out how to do that.
All right, in your chat box, there's a little file button.
In my chat box, there's a little file.
Or 3 dots. It might look different on your iPad.
Oh, Kara Rothberg and Michael. Okay. Let's see. So, everyone, you get to be witness to my learning process. This is awesome. Not okay. So, in my chat box, there is a file button.
Yeah.
I just. There we go. Oh yeah, we did this before, and it did. Remember, it had a. It was funny because it.
Yours connected to the wrong.
It had the wrong icon with the name. It's really weird. Okay. I'm pulling it up.
It's still like that, in case you're wondering. Don't go by the icon.
What?
It's still, the icons are still flipped, so don't go by the icon. Go by the
I'm not.
Okay.
OneDrive. Okay.
I got one.
Here we go.
You need to come in.
Okay. Yeah.
Here we go. So I just picked it. Oh, well, let me. There we go. Oh, you're right. It totally had the wrong. You got to go by the icon.
Is it the icon or is it the word?
The name, the word. Yeah, you're right. You got to go by the word.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's totally messing me up.
You try to teach someone something.
Great.
Okay, hold on.
Cheryl.
You know her?
She taught our class.
Oh,
Come on, where's education? There we go.
right. Okay. Yeah.
Education.
Yeah.
Pirkei Avot. Boom.
In the memory card.
Choose.
Don't choose.
The specified domain is invalid or not applicable for the given permission. Oh, hold on. Visible for all.
Oh, she just came on.
There you go. Look at that, everybody. I did something. Becky.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning. Who am I saying good morning to?
Fran or Margaret.
Oh, hey, Francis Margaret. Cheryl, you're keeping me intrigued with your background. This is great.
By next week, I will be using the one that's outer space.
We are so it's a grasshopper view right now, or?
Yes, the dog and I are outside in the weeds.
Very nice. Well, we're going to be in the weeds. So here we can get back to 0 now. Does everybody have access to the text now? If you go in the chat bar, you can download the text as a Word document. So as I was saying before, there's a tradition about the Zohar, which is the text that is kind of the root text, the base text of a lot of Jewish mystical practice, and a lot of practice that gives root to Kabbalah and actually shapes and colors our practice today. Things like Kabbalat Shabbat and Tikkun Olam. These are ideas that come from the Zohar originally. Not as perhaps talked about today, but their origins are there. So the Zohar, though it comes from probably 12th to 14th century Spain, with some earlier texts, its own claim for its authorship is that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or Rashbi, if you make his name into an acronym, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hid in a cave from Roman oppression, and he wrote the Zohar in that cave in isolation. And so perhaps we'll come up with amazing Torah ourselves. That's what I was, in our isolation, hopefully we'll come up with some great learning and great wisdom. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is the author of our teaching today, and we're doing the second half of the Mishnah we began last week. And last week, we remembered, if you remember, we looked at his teaching where he not really compared, but he talked about the necessary connection or interconnection of what might be at times seen to be competing values, right? So, for example, his final statement that we looked at said, "Ein kemach, ein Torah, ein Torah, ein kemach," and it's a great example to use to represent the whole. So, what that means, if we take the Hebrew, ein means no, kemach means flour, and Torah means Torah, right? So, literally, it means if there's no flour, there is no Torah, and if there's no Torah, there's no flour. And for the rabbis, flour, especially, and bread represented sustenance and physical well-being. So what he's saying there is, if we do not have physical sustenance, we don't have, we take that to be more than that, actually. We take it to be enjoyment of the physical world, then there's no Torah. And likewise, if there's no Torah, then we will not have the ability to sustain ourselves. And he did 4 different couplets like that, which we could go back over, but we won't. I encourage you to check out the earlier part of this Mishnah if you're intrigued, and that's chapter 3, Mishnah 17. Here, we're going to look at the second part of this teaching, which talks about how a person should go about their life in a balance between doing mitzvot and learning, and which is more important, and why. And I think that it'd be good to study this Mishnah, to kind of review it, and then to, after reviewing it, I'll share again some of Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. I'll share some of his biography, and let's see if that has an impact in our understanding of the text. And we'll talk a little bit more about its application to our current situation. You notice there that I caught myself, instead of referring to him by his first name, Elazar ben Azariah, but of adding Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. One of our teachers in rabbinical school was very exacting whenever we get kind of informal in our references to rabbis from the Talmud or other texts, and refer to them by their first name, like Akiba or Shimon, right? That he would say, well, if you made it into the Talmud, perhaps you should still refer to him as rabbi, which so that's always ringing in the back of my head as a tochacha, as a rebuke, a good one. And if I don't do it, then Rebecca will remind me anyway. So, with no further ado, we're picking this up really in the middle of Mishnah 17. So you'll see, if you look at the text page, it's pretty long, right? So all of his teaching is kind of condensed into one. And despite that, you'll see that, well, in most versions or explorations of Pirkei Avot, they split this apart into 2 pieces. Sometimes they'll split that into 2 different, like they'll number each section and make them distinct units. And oftentimes they won't, because that kind of messes with the traditional counting. But instead, we'll just teach the first part and then translate and have explanation, and then teach the second part. So they're definitely kind of seen as distinct units in tradition. Okay, so let's get to it. Hu haya omer. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He used to say, Kol shehachmato meruba mema'asav lemahu dameh. Anyone whose wisdom is more numerous or exceeds his deeds, to what is he comparable? And the answer is, li'ilan shanafav merubin v'sharashav muatin. Right, to a tree whose leaves are more numerous and whose roots are small. And if you can follow the Hebrew, it's good to know, to pick up on some of these words. It's nice to pick up a vocabulary a little bit. In the 3rd line there, merubin, you see the resh and the bet for rav, or for many. And then the last word in that line, mu'at or ma'at, means small, right? So ma'atim. So what does that mean? Like, if anybody have a response to a tree that has many leaves but few roots, what does that sound like?
It gets uprooted very quickly.
So Peter, it gets uprooted very quickly, yeah. And anything else?
Off balance.
Off balance, right? So it's easy to kind of
Topple over.
Or even if it doesn't topple over, right? Which it might, it certainly will. It can like shift around. It's not like an oak tree necessarily, where like you feel like you're leaning up against a pillar. That's not going to go anywhere, right?
It won't thrive.
And it won't thrive.
Mm-mm.
Nice. Okay, so it won't thrive as well. Does it strike you as faster growing or slower growing?
Faster.
Right, that's the other thing. It's not mentioned here, but I think when it comes to
I think a fir.
doing any kind of gardening, right? It's the big leafy ones that are sometimes easy to pull out, but surprisingly ones that have fewer leaves, but they have deep roots that are harder to uproot. Okay, so if you have much study and fewer deeds, then you are like a tree with more leaves and fewer roots. V'haruach ba'a, and the wind will come, v'okaroto v'hofachto al panav, and will uproot the tree and flip it on its face. Shnei Amar, and then we have a text from Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu. V'haya ke'arar ba'ararva, v'lo yir'eh ki yavo tov, v'shachan harerim bamidbar, eretz melecha, v'lo teshev. And that Hebrew even, Jeremiah wrote in a Hebrew that is sometimes challenging, even for, I wouldn't say even for me, like I'm a biblical expert, but Torah and Psalms and a lot of other Hebrew, it's a little bit more simple, but Jeremiah and some of the other prophets can really be challenging in their poetic use of Hebrew. And he shall be like a lonely juniper tree in the wasteland, and shall not see when good comes, but shall inhabit the parched places of the wilderness, a salt-filled land which is uninhabitable. So I have a couple questions about that text. I mean, how is that text relatable to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's teaching? On the grand scheme, it's relatable, right? Because it's about a tree. But is there I'm kind of, there's sometimes when you look at a proof text, you're like, oh, it's pretty much a slam dunk. The proof text says pretty much the same thing that the rabbi said, right? Here,
right.
I'm not quite as convinced. Anyone have any insights into why Rabbi Elazar picked this text?
I think the rabbi seems to talk about a healthy tree.
Okay.
Among other trees.
And whereas Jeremiah,
Talking about a tree in the desert or something.
a lonely tree in a wasteland of salt.
He's much more dire in what he says, isn't he? Jeremiah.
Yeah.
There's one tree and it's going to fall down because it's not doing well in the first couple of verses, but the implication with Jeremiah is if you don't do what you have to do, you create a really horrible, lifeless place.
Oh, okay, Cheryl. So, yeah, I'm following you here. I think if the tree did its job, it would help to make the place more inhabitable. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't take that. I didn't take that walk. I just thought that the analogy here was much more dire. In the first case, a tree is not going to thrive. In the second case, it's not going to thrive, and it's going to be in a place without other trees, in a place that's not inhabitable. It's a much more dire view of what happens when the tree isn't healthy.
Okay. I took it too far. No problem. So let's make sure we understand or even agree with the simile, the comparison that Rabbi Elazar is making, right? So with a tree, we have two different components, according to Rabbi Elazar, that we're concerned with, according to Rabbi Elazar, right? We have the leaves and we have the roots. And he's not asking questions about the trunk or the branches. He's only talking about the leaves and the roots. And with a human being, we're only talking about two different things. He's only talking about our learning, our wisdom, and our deeds. So, is it clear which of our human actions he's comparing to elements of the tree, or which elements of the tree?
Our deeds are the roots, maybe?
I'm not sure.
Our deeds are what, at our roots? Is that what it's saying?
Well, right in the first one, we have wisdom is great and deeds are smaller or less than.
Oh, okay.
Right? And the tree, it has many leaves and few roots. So it would seem that wisdom are the leaves
Mhm.
and actions are the roots.
That's what I was, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Makes sense? Okay. So does that make sense? Do we buy into that kind of comparison?
So is this an argument against like armchair philosophy, I guess? Like don't just
Chair philosophy.
sit there and pretend to be wise. Like you have to have the experiences.
Right, got to do stuff? It could be. I think we want to look at the second part of the comparison text as well. Is that how you hear it, Kara?
That's, I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but that's one thought that's coming to mind.
Right. So in that way, how does wisdom, like let's explore Rabbi Elazar's teaching here. How could leaves be I mean, it's weird on one level, right? I think we should acknowledge it's a little strange for a rabbi to be saying that learning and wisdom come second. And here, he's comparing it to the leaves of a tree. Now, we know leaves are necessary, right? But how are leaves different than roots, especially if it's not an evergreen?
Yeah.
I think it's the opposite.
Right.
Yeah, Ruth?
Yeah, I think that the roots are the wisdom, because from the roots come the trunk and come the branches and come the leaves. And the leaves fall off every year, unless it's a non-deciduous tree. So I kind of see it the opposite way.
So Ruth, is that what you see from your own wisdom, or are you taking that from Rabbi Elazar's text?
I think it's more from my own, because I didn't tune in until a little bit late, and I didn't have a chance to really think about the text. So
okay, yeah. Which is, listen, what you're saying appeals to me. It's not, I don't think it's wrong at all, but I'd like us to
you don't
try
think
and
that's what he's saying?
Yeah, we want to figure out the simile that Elazar is making between a person and a tree.
Okay, that may be.
Right, so
maybe the opposite.
The leaves here are, right, first of all, they're beautiful, they're attractive, and so perhaps, as Kara said, he's saying, like, don't be so beholden, don't be so persuaded or attracted to little brilliant pearls of wisdom that fall from someone, right? Because like the leaves, those will come and go, but instead be looking for one who's well rooted, who has done mitzvot, who has many deeds, and has kind of done that work of sinking those roots into the soil, so it's got a firm and a well-established foundation.
But leaves and roots depend on each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have no photosynthesis without leaves.
Absolutely.
But you can't, hold on to water without roots.
Yep. So he's noticed. We should notice he's not saying one is good and the other one is bad, right?
Right.
He's talking here about balance.
That's right.
Right.
And it also might help us to really, I think one of the ways that we can get more access into the Jeremiah text is to remember about the region in which he lives, right? Where rain happens only for a short period of time. And a tree or a bush survives on its ability to be connected underground through roots to supplies of water. Which is true of our trees as well, but not to the same degree.
There have been times in our history, and even now, when certain groups of people have only studied, only thought. And it seems to me that one of the things he might be saying is that that's simply not enough, that if you use that wisdom, then it's pretty much worthless. It's just not worth it. You need to be actively involved in the world with what you know. I don't know what the times were like when he was writing.
And what could happen if you're not?
If you're not involved?
Yeah, if you're not involved.
You
You're just
think great thoughts, but you're having no impact, no positive impact on the world. You're not doing tikkun olam. You're not engaging in what your community needs. You're not using your wisdom in ways that helps people.
okay.
I would suggest that the issue becomes, if you think of current nature, if you want to limit soil erosion, you need your trees and you need the roots, and that maintains the soil all around it and it keeps things going. If you don't have those strong roots, then the soil erosion will occur and your trees and your leaves and everything else would go. So that trees become that important that you do your best to keep them going, because you want to keep the whole environment around the tree safe. So the significance becomes the roots. And you can have all kinds of leaves. You can have all kinds of different trees. The key becomes, is it well rooted, and will it benefit all the other trees around you? And so that's why trees become so important in terms of reforestation.
Okay. Very good. Let's take a look at the second half of the Mishnah and then talk about its applicability to us today. You know, how we might look at its wisdom.
Yeah.
Aval, kol shema asab merubin mechochmato. However, anyone whose deeds are more numerous than their wisdom, lama hudame, to what are they similar? Li'ilan shanafav muatin v'sharashav merubin, to a tree that's leaves are less numerous and its roots are more numerous. Sha'afilu kol haruchot sheba'olam ba'ot, that even, excuse me, even if all the winds of the world, this is a bit of exaggeration, even if the strongest winds in all the world came and blew upon it, v'noshavot bo, ein mizizin oto mimakomo, it will not be moved from its place. Shene Emar, and here we get another quote from Jeremiah, only 2 verses later in the same place, in Jeremiah that is. V'haya ke'etz shatul al ma'im v'al yuval yishalach shorashav v'lo yir'eh ki yavo chom v'haya alehu ra'anan uvishnat betzoret lo yidag v'lo yamish me'asot peri. Right, he shall be like a tree planted by the waters. It spreads out its roots by the river, and shall not really notice or perceive when the heat comes. But its leaf shall remain fresh, and it shall not be troubled in the year of drought, nor will it cease to bear fruit. Right, so if you do more deeds, then you study, Then you will have deep roots, which will give you a kind of a continuous connection to the source of water or life in this case, which will make you less impacted by changing circumstance.
We live in strange.
Right? So less affected by changing circumstance, and therefore you will be able to continue to bear fruit in your place and not be moved from it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at this text, I think it's hard not to come away with Kara's first kind of perception of it, that he's being critical of people who demonstrate perhaps or put out like little who's talking and who's teaching and whose presentation is the dominant thing, and their deeds are less prominent or important, or that they put less effort into those, right? So here, let me kind of look at Kara, look at Corey just walking behind the sanctuary. If everyone can see, I don't know. Or I don't know if you can only see me, or if only I can see everybody, I don't know. So let's talk about Elazar ben Azariah for a second in his biography, because it might help us understand this a little bit. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah becomes the head of the Sanhedrin, rabbinically speaking, we say the Sanhedrin, but at the time, it's, at least from a historical perspective, likely that it was a much more murky situation. There was not yet rabbinic dominance in the Jewish world, and the group of rabbis was probably more modest than the words that they use, that the rabbis of Babylonia 200 or 300 years later use to describe them, right? Because by 200 or 300 years later, the rabbis in Babylonia are really the dominant Jewish force, pretty much. And so they are writing back about the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael of hundreds of years earlier with the understanding of their own current circumstances, right? So according to this, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah becomes the head of the Sanhedrin because a famous rabbi, Rabban Gamliel, is deposed. So Rabban Gamliel was a rabbi in Yavna who was in charge of, who was kind of, I hate to say it, it's kind of, because I hate to make mafia references to early rabbis, but it's similar in that he puts out hits against other rabbinic authority. He doesn't kill them. That's the difference between the mafia movie and rabbinic literature. But he does undermine their authority, right? He specifically does things that either embarrass or undermine another rabbi's authority. And for doing so, the other rabbis get a little uncomfortable after it happens too many times, and he is deposed. In his place, they need to have someone who everyone can agree upon. And it turns out to be Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who has a few things going for him. Number one, he's learned. Number two, he's only 18 at the time, and so he hasn't really taken sides. He's seen as kind of neutral. And number three, he comes from a wealthy family that has kind of what we say in the Jewish world, has yichus, right? He has connections. So he represents he's this great balance of representing kind of the power authority without having made a decision. So he's kind of innocence with a connection, and that gives him this place. Now, over time, he eventually, there's like a power sharing agreement. I wonder if this might be portending what's going to happen in Israel with the prime ministers, or with that power sharing agreement between blue and white and Likud, who knows? But eventually, there's a power sharing agreement where Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah rotate the head of the Sanhedrin. Right. So here he comes in, to leadership of the Sanhedrin. And what, from the story I tell, what do you imagine he thinks his job is? What's he trying to accomplish?
Survival of his role.
Francis, perfect. Number one, he just wants to make it to day 2, right? That's a very important thing. And what might help him do so?
He could use the other rabbi to increase his.
Okay, so he can make sure that he makes connections with other rabbis and uses them, for sure.
Calm the situation down if it's gotten to the point of deposing another rabbi.
Okay, so, right, Hillary, great. Like, so really important here. He does not want to do things probably that are going to unsettle everything, but he wants to keep things calm and keep relations good between people.
Right.
Those are all good. Anything else? Okay, so I think those are all good observations, and they're the ones that I have. So let's ask ourselves, does that experience perhaps, or being in that position perhaps, can give us an understanding into why he creates this teaching here? This teaching of being like a tree, where it's more important that you have deeper roots than that you have numerous leaves. I just want to make it clear, I don't have like a right answer. There's no right answer here. So
just like in academia, you have a lot of professors who will have a lot of theories and can put out all kinds of information and have done very little except use their brains and concocted all kinds of ideas. But when they go out into the real world, as we often hear, people have great ideas, but when they go out in the real practical world, what happens? And similarly with all these rabbis, they all have these great ideas, they all can think and theorize, yet what's it based on?
Also, isn't this a time, a long period of time when when the rabbis came to conclusions, they then they had truth. And a lot of the fighting or the contention was contention among truth sayers.
Cheryl, could you say that again? Because Corey's dog Milo was barking, and I think it was hard for everyone to hear. She's muted herself now.
It wasn't that brilliant. My limited reading of the rabbis in this period, this long period, is that a lot of the contention among them was in the guise of their having truth. So they, studied, they came up with their own personal wisdom, it became truth, and then they fought with each other about who had the right way.
Mm-hmm. And so does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah strike you as going along with that, or is he kind of countering that trend?
Did you ask me?
Yeah, well, anyone can answer, but since you put out that idea, I'm asking.
Okay.
You.
So, and then I'm going to get my dog to stop barking.
Okay.
I think that, to me, the reading is, especially in the beginning, yes, throughout this thing, is that if you're just concentrating on your own personal belief and your own personal wisdom, that is not productive for the community. If you're fighting among these areas of supposed truth, that's not useful. That reaching out into the community and doing things that are in people's best interest is a stronger position to take.
I would add to that keep in mind that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was 18 years old. And it's typical of what you might find even today. Young people are saying, nice theories and so on, what are you doing? What are you showing me that I should follow? Right. And so, talk all you want, but I'm not going to get so moved by it as much as by what you can show me you've done.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. So do we read him as being more impacted or more motivated by his position as a wealthy person, as a person who's got connections, or do you read him as being more motivated by his youth?
I think.
No, I think the latter. He's more idealistic at that point in his life than we jaded older people.
Yeah. And also, he's less. Well, I don't know. Does he sound like he's less enchanted by his own words,
What again? You've got all this wisdom, but what
or
again?
more?
Can I offer a comparison?
Absolutely.
I see the rabbis as the container of wisdom, and the health of the community is the leaves. So if they're not, or the community is the visible above the ground, you might say. So it's not healthy. Wisdom doesn't matter.
Well, it matters. It has to have balance.
I see that in the event Christian perspective. We have great TV ministers, but they're not out there marching. They're not out there running food banks.
Yeah.
And sometimes their lives do not reflect their wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be balanced.
I'm fascinated by the idea that he was 18 years old. I mean, I know 18 was a little bit different back then, life expectancy of 30, but how often did that happen, and what would it have been like to try to?
How often did it happen that someone that young?
That young, that the leaders in the community were that.
I mean, that young, not too often, but it certainly, there were different lifespans back then. At the same time, Torah and rabbinic tradition gives tremendous respect and authority to experience and age and wisdom, right? So I'm not sure if you want to pipe in here, but I think very frequently it would be who kind of comes with that with a wealth of experience that is most likely going to be at the center than a young person.
It is rare to find such a young person. Fortunately, I met, and I know a young person who really is we call him an Eloi in Hebrew, but a brilliant genius. I mean, there were two people who I'm familiar with. Some you may really know. Rabbi David Weiss, who was at the seminary with a scholar in residence there. And another one is Hanan Weiss in Israel, who at the age of 17 and a half completed the study of the Talmud totally and was able to quote things all over the place. And indeed, the chief rabbi of Israel came to hear his speech when he came out of the seminary. So there are rare people like that, but it's not usual. But they can add a tremendous amount of perspective, especially when you think that people tend to think young people have very little to offer. Go listen to your elders, and many times young people have a great deal to offer.
Indeed. Go ahead.
So one thing I'm thinking of pulling from the some of the Talmud stuff is Eleazar Ben Azariah is trying to open up, is depicted as trying to open up learning to more people than were allowed previously. And so this may also be a sort of rebuke towards perhaps the sort of opposing group.
Yes.
I'm not on mute. Sorry.
It's a democratization.
Or maybe not democracy, but an opening up, bringing in other people who may not feel that they had the formal learning from the right people to take part.
Yeah. Nice. It might be a bit of a jump here, a bit of a challenge, but it's a good question, I think, to think about as we enter this period of unique isolation, yet
Unique silence.
yet with an ability to connect. It's kind of like this weird dichotomy, right, where we are isolated from one another physically, but do have the ability to connect in these ways and these means. Is there anything in this teaching that we see applying to today in these special circumstances?
I certainly am seeing a lot of people at the root level reach out in a lot of different ways. You know, from doing things like this to artists putting their work online for free, to people reaching out to their neighbors to say, I am shopping, can I help you? I just see what looks to me like a great uptick in connectivity indeed.
Mm-hmm. I certainly have been very pleased with my rabbinic colleagues that, you know, both locally and also nationally, who, when we're talking about how do we balance traditional concerns of halacha and kind of how do we operate as a community, by and large recognize that this is a time unlike any other, and it's a time to be more concerned with watering the roots than the leaves and the, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of take it that way, that it's a time where you know, we have it's the sad advantage of being forced to recognize there's one dominant force that we have to pay heed to, and that is keeping people safe so that our healthcare system can manage what will come, and we have to adjust everything else to meet that need in this time. You know, and I'm thankful that people that I didn't expect, even in the Orthodox community, I mean, in the standard Orthodox community, I think we've sadly seen some poor examples from the ultra-Orthodox or the Haredi community. But the Orthodox Union came out with a statement a couple days ago about Passover as well, saying, don't invite people over, do not gather together for Seder. Now, I don't know if they'll go as far as saying, yeah, do your Seder online. Or if they're going to have, coming from the Orthodox perspective, have more like a wink and nod kind of approach. Whereas we will be more open about that, and we will be doing things that we've never done before, you know, like doing the online services and an online Seder. But I think that this text here helps us have a focus on what's important, which is the roots, and tending to those and bringing water to them. Anybody have additional wisdom or questions about the text that they would like to bring forth?
I would like to suggest that we keep expanding our roots in this community so that we can do more, and it really serves the people of the community and people who are in need, because that is what is important right now, our ability to help each other and reach out, keeping ourselves rooted in the basic tradition of helping our fellow man.
That's a great point, Anshul. It's a great point. And I think that what we're trying to do is to be ready to scale up as we are inspired and as we have the ability to meet needs of our community. And so it would be actually one thing that'd be really helpful is if anyone has ideas or needs that are not being met yet, to share them so that we can figure out how to do so. So I don't know if anyone has any ideas so far. But we certainly, let me say, we certainly welcome any knowledge, any feedback, any ideas that you have. You know, we're not the only source of wisdom here by far from it. And we would like to learn from everyone and see what we can do. Or as Picasso liked to say, a great artist doesn't borrow, they steal. So we're not ashamed to just, to steal the ideas and things we see in other places. But if you have a creative idea or a way that we can meet a need, please let us know so that we can, try to figure out how together we can put it together. Let me then just take a moment and kind of highlight some things that are coming up. Every day every day except for Saturday right now, we have a daily minyan at 5:45. And on Shabbat, we're working on a kind of a transitional program where we'll have a kind of a Tat Shabbat at 5, maybe some family time to bless our children together at 5:30, and then our regular Kabbalat Shabbat service at 5:45. And Shabbat morning, kind of a condensed hour of kind of camp-like davening from 10 to 11, and a youth service from 11 to 11:30. Those are our kind of ritual prayer offerings. We also have classes and hangouts. So last night was the first night of a class on Buber and Heschel, taught by Rabbi Phil Cohen. That was at 7 or 7:30, Corey?
7.
7, very good. Today we have our Pirkei Avot class, and tonight we have, there's a conversion and a adult Benot Mitzvah class. And then tomorrow is Wednesday, and on Wednesday, what's happening?
Possibly.
Mindfulness session at 7:30 with Andra LeBauer and myself. We're condensing it down to half an hour and focusing on kind of our mindfulness of this time period. On Thursday, an Ask the Rabbi session at 2:30. Any questions you have about anything are welcome, and hang out and have a cup of coffee. And then Friday and Saturday, we have our services as well. So we'll continue to expand, and I know we've been talking about a few other class options that we can add in, and we're going to kind of rise up to meet that, kind of expand out to do that as we can, and as people have the need for and desire. But I tell you, I think for me at least, one of the greatest things is just being able to look out and see your faces, and it does, it really pierces the isolation to be able to learn and study together, even using this kind of crazy medium that's new to us. So I hope everyone stays safe and clean. Is there, I hate to say safe and clean, that's such a weird thing to say, but is anybody in need of anything? Because it's also an opportunity to check in.
We're not in need of anything, but I think you need to pay particular attention to widows who are alone,
yep,
and are definitely isolated, and
absolutely
thoughts.
So let me mention that we have our executive committee, and we're encouraging our board as well, and in addition to our staff, are reaching out and making weekly calls to people that we at least perceive as being more likely to be isolated.
Right.
So if we don't, if we see them in other places, then we can feel, like I see Corey, and I hear her dog barking in the background, so I know she's good. But we check we're trying to check in on those people, and we're also trying to find ways that we can be helpful, even with the isolation that needs to happen.
Well, I have one suggestion.
Yes, Peter.
There is a lot of pressure on the food banks to help, indigents.
Yep.
It would behoove us to make donations to those so that they don't run dry.
Absolutely. And let me say that I think I'm hopeful that in the coming days as a congregation, we're going to take the money that we had assigned to Mitzvah Day, and we're going to purchase food and donate it to our JFS food bank. Hopefully we'll do that. But let me say that even if we haven't gotten to that point yet, because people don't want to abandon the idea of Mitzvah Day quite yet, we certainly can do so ourselves. And there is a great new possibility, or an easy possibility, of ordering food on Amazon and having it delivered directly to the Jewish Family Services Food Bank as one option. I mean, there are other options. And just by way of pointing out, we did have volunteers together with our partners at College Park Baptist on Sunday, handing out food at Lindley Park with Out of the Garden. So that's an important project where we distribute food that otherwise would go to waste. And it's also pretty safe because each client or recipient family pulls up in a car and you just put the food in the trunk. So it's very limited contact.
Yeah.
So we're looking at how, projects that we can do that will be more doable with fewer risks to anyone's health.
Right.
Peter, very good point. We got to do more.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, everybody, have a good day, and it was great to see your faces, and I'll hopefully see you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
you.
Yeah.